Hi, Roy here, and welcome again to another edition of The Right Has Left. I am your host, Roy Garden, and welcome to my podcast. As we do on this show each and every week, we talk about the latest news from the Trump administration, and sometimes we cover events going on here in the state of Florida. But there is so much news this week from the Trump administration and all the hearings that they've been having. I'm just going to basically cover President Donald Trump and some of the hearings that have been going on this past week. I like to do deep dives into these stories that break because sometimes the mainstream media fails to do so. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Now, the top prosecutor in upstate New York was fired by the White House just hours after federal judges appointed him to the post. It's the latest in the tug-of-war between the Trump administration and the judiciary over President Trump's efforts to install loyalist U.S. attorneys across the country, skirting approval from both the Senate and the courts. Now, veteran prosecutor Donald Kinsella was just sworn in as U.S. attorney for the Northern District of New York in a private ceremony Wednesday, according to an announcement from the district court. Later that evening, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche wrote in the social platform X that Kinsella was removed from their role. Judges don't pick U.S. attorneys. The President of the United States does, Blanche wrote. See Article 2 of our Constitution. You are hereby fired, Donald Kinsella. Wow, isn't that something? I'm just going to throw my weight around and get rid of that guy in a hurry. Again, typically, as has been the normalcy with the Congress, when you appoint attorney generals, they do get approval. But, Donald Trump wants all of these loyalists to where he can skirt the laws. So when he jumps, the attorney generals, as we're going to see here momentarily with even like with Pam Bondi, the chief, attorney general of the U.S., they're supposed to say, how high do you want me to jump, Donald Trump? And he just wants to have these blanket people across so he can just go right ahead and, do whatever he wants. And then when he needs some law skirted, these attorney generals would do so for him. So this is just, another case of what's happening here in the United States. And it's basically kind of sad. Now, also, state Democrats voted Thursday to, block a motion to advance a White House passed bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security, putting Washington on the brink of a partial government shutdown. And as I tape this on a Saturday, that's already happening. And of course, it's going to affect more than 260,000 federal employees. The motion, which required 60 votes, failed to advance by a vote of 52 to 47. Centrist Senator John Fetterman, who is a Democrat from Pennsylvania, sometimes he kind of votes on both sides of the aisle there, even though he is a Democrat, who has a long-standing policy of voting against government shutdown, was the only Democrat again to vote for advancing the measure. Senator Majority Leader John Thune, who is a Republican from South Dakota, voted no for procedural reasons to be able to bring the bill back to the floor quickly at a later date. Shortly after, Senator Katie Britt, who is also a Republican from Alabama, attempted to get unanimous consent to move a 2-week stopgap bill, but Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, objected. Thomas Massie also, during that time, also had some comments about whether or not, this bill will even get through the Senate. Now, the Democrats blocked the legislation after rejecting an offer from the White House that they said didn't go far enough to reform immigration enforcement operations. And, of course, there was hearings on that this past week, which I'll get into, after the fatal shootings of the two protesters in Minneapolis last month. As a result, funding for key agencies such as the Transportation Security Administration, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the Coast Guard will lapse Saturday without further action from Congress. These agencies that are the main targets for Democrats' fury, however, has been an ongoing discussion. So, in a nutshell, the Democrats are using this as a kind of a stopgap as far as funding ICE to get a point across. There is still billions of dollars that is available to ICE. So just so you folks know, even with the stopgap, and of course other agencies will suffer from it, it's not going to hurt ICE because they still got money out the butt from, cutting funds for Medicare, Medicaid, and everything else, so they can go on and continue to arrest 3,000 people a day across our great United States. And the Democrats are trying to make a point that these ICE agents need to have body cameras. They need to remove these, masks across their face. They need to have these stopgap, warrants that they typically use just to break in anybody's home without needing a typical warrant signed by a judge. The Democrats are trying to protect you, the U.S. citizens, so this is the only way they have to do it. The funding for ICE is still going to go on going. Nothing's going to stop. So it's a sad situation. Sometimes people get upset because the Democrats have done this, but what else are they supposed to use for things that they can tools that are available to them, which is of course very little. So now let's move on to the House has also voted to rescind tariffs that Donald Trump imposed on Canada last year in what has been seen as a rare bipartisan rebuke of the White House's trade policy. The largely symbolic resolution to disapprove of the national emergency Trump declared on imposed tariffs on Canada passed 219 to 211 with 6 Republicans, Don Bacon of Nebraska, Thomas Massey of Kentucky, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Kevin Kiley of California, Dan Newhouse of Washington, and Jeff Hurd of Colorado, all voting along with the Democrats, except Jared Golden of Maine, who voted against it. Any Republican in the House of the Senate that votes against the tariffs will seriously suffer the consequences come election time, and that includes the primaries, Trump warned on Truth Social before the vote was finalized, adding tariffs have given us economic and national security, with no Republican should be responsible for destroying this privilege. Undoing Trump's tariff policy would ultimately require his approval, which was unlikely. Now, this past Wednesday, he warned Republicans against voting for the resolution, which GOP leaders had worked to forestall. The measure next goes to the Senate. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said Trump's tariffs were causing prices to skyrocket and creating unnecessary uncertainty for American families. And what he is saying is true, and I'm going to point that out to you here later in this podcast. Now, for months, these Republicans in the House have tried to block us from acting on behalf of the American peoples, Jeffrey wrote in a statement after the resolution was approved. Today, House Democrats forced a successful vote to detonate the Trump tariffs on Canada. Now, even the Republicans understand that our relationship with our good friends to the north, Canada, is important. And I got another story here just a moment on this podcast about a bridge that Trump, he cannot stand to have, Canada be a good person. He wants to absorb Canada as our 51st state. He wants to be the big power guy. He's got this ego, this complex of him that, I am the king. I rule the world on the western side of the hemisphere. This part is mine, and the Soviets and China can have that side, but this side's all mine, and I want control of all of it. And it's basically what you're seeing. And so now even the Republicans are starting to wake up and say, you can't be messing with Canada like that. Our all of our northern states from, North Dakota to Maine, that borders Canada, they go back and forth daily. We can't have this animosity and rudeness, but he doesn't seem to give a crap. All right. So the Trump administration is dramatically also expanding an effort to revoke U.S. citizenship for foreign-born Americans as it works to curb immigration, according to 2 people familiar with the plans. Over the past several months, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the agency with the Department of Homeland Security that's responsible for legal immigration, has been sending experts to its offices around the country are reassigning staff members to focus on whether some citizens processed through those offices should be denaturalized. Folks, you are hearing me correctly on this. Donald Trump is now working to people who have natural citizenship here in the United States to have that revoked. I kid you not. Look at this Truth social posts that Donald Trump has done, and that goes on with this with the SAVE Act that we're going to be talking about here very shortly. Okay, this all ties in together. If you just so you know, between the SAVE Act and people needing their full IDs to vote, well, this all ties in with the naturalization of citizens. Now he wants to start deporting those people as well, and that's scary stuff. And so let me continue here, and then when I get to the story about this natural ID thing, you're going to see how the two tie together. So the goal is emphasizing a naturalized citizen is to supply the Office of Immigration litigation with 100 to 200 possible cases per month. See, you always see these quotas that he's got. You want to deport 3,000 people a day, and now we want to start deporting at least 200 people a day who are naturalized citizens. And of course, again, they always use the excuses. They're all ill. They're all got criminal records. They're all drug pushers. They're all pedophiles. All these naturalized citizens that grew up here in the United States, they all got criminal records. So when we use the word all, then we can just get all of them out of here. This is the thing with this guy. Now, such cases have typically been very rare, involving people who conceal criminal histories or previous human rights violations during their application processes. The New York Times first reported the quota. Now, by comparison, throughout the 4 years of President Donald Trump's first term, the administration formally filed a total of 102 such cases, according to the Justice Department. The effort is part of the overall push by Homeland Security to drastically curtail immigration and deliver on Trump's policies agenda. Project 2025, basically. The push has included DHS sending scores of immigration enforcement officers into United States cities on deportation missions and purchasing mega warehouses to hold detainees. Folks, that's even happening here in Florida. They're looking at a huge warehouse in Orlando, just as I record this, to put these detainees in. This is why they need these billions of dollars. We want to create these Gestapo-type concentration camps to put these people in. There's even a story where, they have 60 men in a holding area, 60 and one toilet. And the health crisis and the diseases are increasing there, and these people don't give a rat. I know they'll say something to the public. It's all good. They're all being taken care of, medical care. But, we've had one state senator who's finally gotten into one of these detention centers, and he found, it was disgusting what he found. So they're lying out of their teeth to you, just so you know that. And so the DHS has also increasingly sought to remove legal immigrants from the U.S. by revoking thousands of visas, including for some people who have participated in pro-Palestinian protests, their First Amendment rights, and trying to deport green card holders. A spokesman for the USCIS, Matthew Tergesser, said the agency reviews cases of naturalized citizens when there is credible evidence that citizenship was obtained through fraud or misrepresentation. We maintain a zero-tolerance policy towards fraud in the naturalization process and will pursue denaturalization proceedings for any individual who's lied or misrepresented themselves, he said. Now, let me just digress here a little bit. As with Pam Bondi and with ICE and everything else, they like to tell the American people, that we're just going after the bad people, the ones who have, criminally misrepresented themselves for naturalization. 90% of people, when we use the word naturalization, they were born here in the U.S. And when, as with the Constitution, if you're born in the United States, you become naturally a U.S. citizen. And so now they're going through and saying we're weeding out all the bad people who misrepresented themselves. That's total crap. They're going after even people who have no criminal background, just like with ICE, rounding up these people who maybe their green card expired by a couple of months, and some say have no criminal background, but they're still deporting them because they want to deport 3,000 people a day. And this is what this is going to grow into with naturalized citizens. They're going to start with a few, and then they're going to start deporting hundreds and hundreds of people who have no criminal background just because they can. It's a part of cleaning up all the brown-skinned people here in the U.S. and this pro-Palestinian thing. So what if you're pro-Palestinian? We've got a U.S. congresswoman from Minnesota who's a Palestinian. Does that make, just because he got the name Palestinian, are we going to be racist and say you're Palestinian, so therefore you're bad? You must be with Hamas, and which is a lie. There's most of the Palestinian people are wonderful people. Just because they happen to live in Palestine, does that make them a bad apple? Well, according to Israel, it does. And now, and Israel's got most of the U.S. people's, going on their side. Palestinians bad. Jesus Christ was a Palestinian. I thought, just so you remember that, Christ himself was born in Palestine. Yeah. So is Jesus Christ a bad person? No. Just think about that for just a moment, please. Put that in the back of your head. Critical thinking skills, ladies and gentlemen. Critical thinking skills. All right. So, again, this is stuff that's going on, and it's sad that we have to focus on now. We're going to naturalize citizens. We're going to start going after them as well. Yeah. So, let's go to our top story today. You're going to love this one. Our top story is going to focus on a lady who just totally lost it in the hearings. Our Attorney General, Pam Bondi. Yeah. Boy, was that a circus. I don't know if any of you caught any of that. Her hearing that they put her in front of in reference to the Epstein files. Yeah, well, Attorney General Pam Bondi testified before the House Judiciary Committee Wednesday, and it was a show. It really was. Just watch this brief clip of just some of the interaction.
Including drug cases, correct?
Oh, I prosecuted homicides. I prosecuted capital cases. I prosecuted domestic violence cases. I prosecuted multiple cases, and that's why I feel for all of these victims. And did you ask Merrick Garland this when you were sitting before him, sir?
You also prosecuted sexual assault cases and child sex trafficking cases, correct?
I answered that question earlier.
Okay.
I prosecuted multiple cases.
So
when I was
bottom line, you're an
experienced
and seasoned.
For 18 years.
Mr. Chairman, will you remind her of the rules? The time belongs to the member of the committee.
You are a seasoned and experienced prosecutor, correct?
I think we've established that.
Yes or no?
Does he want an answer or not?
I think he wants to say
I want a yes or no answer.
I think he wants to say
I want a yes or no answer, but I'll live with what you have already said. Let me ask you this question.
Clearly,
in the prosecution of sexual assault cases, you are acutely aware of how important it is to protect the identity of victims of sexual assault, correct?
I have addressed this multiple times. I think others were cutting me off when I was trying to.
Well, I just simply asked, are you aware of the fact that it's vitally important to protect the identity of sexual assault victims as you prosecute the people they accuse of assaulting them? Isn't that correct?
Excuse me. As we have said multiple times,
protection of the identity
of all victims
of the victims
are
is
protected.
So very
who are
important.
Protected under? Do you want me to answer or do you want to interrupt?
Well, because you're not answering the question. You do a Jekyll and Hyde kind of routine around here, and I just want you to answer my questions.
What does Jekyll and Hyde mean? Can you explain
it means
that?
You're nice to the Republicans and you turn like Hyde on Democrats. But let me ask you this, ma'am. We have the Epstein victim survivors here today. Representative Jayapal asked a simple question: if you would be so kind and honorable as to turn around and face them and apologize to them for outing them. I mean, how many lives have been derailed because your department was either sloppy and incompetent or willfully trying to intimidate and punish these ladies for coming forward?
The time of the
Which was it?
The time of the gentleman has expired.
So, yeah, Democrats on the panel had intensely interrogated Bondi over some of the controversial moves the department has made under her tenure, including its handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. And as typical with these hearings, she got softball questions, of course, from the Republicans. And, of course, the Democrats, they kind of drilled at her a little bit harder. And she just totally avoided all the questions from the Democrats. Now, she was smiling and really kind to the Republicans and fighting and yelling at the Democrats, often avoiding their questions entirely, going off script about Trump's job numbers and stock prices, whatever the hell that's got to do with the Epstein files. I have no idea. And Bondi was also photographed during a congressional appearance before the House Judiciary Committee this past Wednesday, flipping through a document titled J-Pal Familia, a search history, which is seemingly reviewing the activity of the Washington Democrat who tangled with Bondi during the hearing. She brought that up. And that is true. As you can see in this photograph, she had a binder with her that had all of the communications that went between whoever was on the congressional committee looking at emails about the Epstein files and their responses and what they were looking at. The Justice Department was actually spying on all of these Democrats, and they knew it. Okay, they knew they were spying on them. It's no secret. They knew when they had the privilege of going through the redacted Epstein files and seeing the unredacted Epstein file documents. Bondi was watching them through emails. So yeah, she was actually watching them, even though it was electronic. And so this person got a picture of her going through that notebook she had really with him, so she would know how to counteract whatever the congressional people were asking her. Total BS, but she was doing that. And but members were very unnerved about that the DOJ was apparently tracking and spying on their searches to have it ready. It's totally inappropriate and against the separations of powers for the Department of Justice to surveillance us as we search the Epstein files. That is our total right to do so. And she had that burn book with her. And that really was the main thing of the whole week of this hearing. It was when, she got caught having that burn book with her and somebody took a picture of it. And, of course, they're saying that's outrageous. I intend to pursue this and stop this spying on members, said Pamela J-Paul, who is is a Democrat from Washington. It's Pramelia, by the way, not Pamela, Pramelia J-Paul. And she wrote on her social platform X after seeing that photograph. Speaker Mike Johnson also believe it or not, expressed alarm, calling any effort to monitor lawmakers is inappropriate, And, for Mike Johnson to say that, I'm sure Trump will call him up and say, you bad boy, you're not supposed to talk like that. You're supposed to support me 100%. And he'll, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, He's such a wimp. And, of course, so the takeaways from this hearing: Bondi frequently used personalized insults against lawmakers, refusing to back down during intense questioning and defending her actions with aggressive counterattacks. Of course, she had that book with her to do so. And when she was pressed on the Jeffrey Epstein case, Bondi provided calculated, sometimes evasive answers, maintaining that a client list was under review while dealing with scrutiny from both sides of the aisle. And she also strongly countered allegations that she was politicizing the Justice Department, arguing instead that she is addressing a freefall within the Department of Justice from past administrations through this trigger heated debates. And the hearing was marked by a lack of decorum, with outbursts resulting in a fiery atmosphere, as we saw in that video, and I'm sure most of you did too with other video clips, rather than a routine oversight session. Now, despite her aggressive approach, some of her responses did not land effectively, and the session highlighted ongoing tensions between her leadership and congressional critics. The bottom line here, Pam Bondi was trying to put on an aggressive show to save her butt, all right? She knows she's in extremely hot water with the Trump administration. And so she's trying to look really tough out there, and I'm the Attorney General, and look how great I am, and while all along she's basically trying to say, Donald, I'm still cool, I'm still here to fight on your behalf, and please don't fire me. And I honestly don't think her job is in trouble. Trump's going to keep her because she's doing exactly what he wants her to do. And so from a congressional hearing point of view, I thought it was the most, if I was a president, I would have been embarrassed by a person acting like a sixth grader out there, screaming and yelling and not answering questions. I understand that you can, there's some things that you want to do to protect the administration that puts you in its place, but even the MAGA faithful want answers on the Epstein files, and she provided zero integrity in that aspect, in my opinion. In the same week, we've also had hearings on ICE. Now, Senator Rand Paul says ICE must restore public trust, and the Republican Kentucky senator says he called an oversight hearing to evaluate the facts around immigration enforcement in Minnesota and across the country. Paul said that during his opening statement that anytime an American citizen is killed, it's a tragedy, but made clear that filming government officials in a free society is a constitutional right and not an act of aggression. Now, Paul criticized what he called a rush to judgment after the shootings and said while he supports immigration and customs enforcement, that they had to work to do so to restore public trust. Now, Minnesota Attorney General, which, Keith Ellison, who is right here, he was, of course, one of the mainframe people that was in the public eye and there to answer questions. And again, the Democrats supported what this gentleman from Minnesota was doing, while the Republicans chose to attack him. Again, these are the Republican faithful to Donald Trump, who supports ICE and anything and everything they're doing and can find no fault with them. But they blame the entire incident in Minnesota basically on Ellison. And again, that's very sad. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison also happened to say that it's highly unusual for the state to be shut out of investigations of shootings like they have in the aftermath of the deaths of the two Americans. And if you recall, Minnesota had absolutely no warning or anything coming towards them that when ICE arrived in the state of Minnesota with over 3,000 agents. And even after they were starting to, task down and leave, he had no notification that we're doing so. Trump just comes into a state and sends his agents into these states and doesn't say anything to anybody. It's like, I'll do whatever the hell I want, and you have no right to say anything. I don't care if you're part of the United States. We're going to do what we want. We're the federal government. I am Donald Trump. And of course, he was asked by Democratic Senator Gary Peters of Michigan about what type of cooperation the state had with the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department on investigations into the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. His answer, zero. We've had none. So just so you know, nearly 2/3 of Americans say ICE has gone too far in immigration crackdown. We haven't had any cooperation up until now, which is really unusual, Ellison said. And what they've got now is, and I'm going to tell you why they're starting to maybe cooperate just a little bit here in just a second. I'm going to give you the teaser on this. So at the beginning of a Senate hearing on immigration enforcement in Minnesota, the state attorney general's Keith Ellison asked for an end to the enforcement surge in his state, saying it's already gone too far. And he didn't know when they were in this hearings that Tom Homan, who had a quick press briefing, announced that it was ending its appearance in the state of Minnesota. They were going to start winding down. Now, whether that's 2 weeks, 2 months, we don't know. But he did say they're starting to leave the state of Minnesota. And, of course, when you're in these hearings, these people got their phones on silencer and everything. And so Republican Senator James Langford told the panel about Homan's announcement, say it was probably news that people here would like to hear. Again, Keith Ellison was under such scrutiny by the Republicans. They kept saying that the shootings was his fault and that he wasn't controlling the people in the state. And even Bernie Moreno of Ohio attacked Ellison, calling him a low caliber witness. To see Republicans, they're bullies. They talk like, look at me, I'm on camera. I want you to pay attention to me. Look how cool I am. Look how I can just tell people and cut them down. And, in my opinion, you look like children. You look like grade school bullies. So, and they did play the video as well in these hearings of the Preding killing in front of the CBP chief at the Senate hearing. And Rand Paul took the time by frame to see if, do you see what we see here? And so, Commissioner Rodney Scott, who was there representing ICE, he basically said, well, he was resisting. And they said, well, show us where he's resisting. He couldn't answer that. All right. So he really didn't have any answers to the video, which is proof to all the American people that there was something wrong here. Now, just so you know, why I said earlier that perhaps now the Department of Homeland Security and ICE is starting to cooperate with the people of Minnesota just a little bit, because there was some late breaking news that just came out yesterday that 2 immigration agents may have made untruthful statements in sworn testimony about the shooting of a migrant in Minneapolis last month. Immigration and Customs Enforcement have said ICE Acting Director Todd Lyons said the 2 officers, whose names aren't being mentioning, were immediately placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation because they have caught them, and they said, the 2 agents, that they were lying under oath, and it's a serious federal offense, Lyons said. On Friday, a judge granted a request to drop charges against 2 men who were accused of attacking those officers. The Department of Homeland Security initially said a federal officer shot a man in the leg after being attacked with a shovel and broom handle by 3 migrants on the 14th of January on Friday. Now, this is a separate incident from the actual shooting deaths, okay? But still, there were some charges made against some other people who said they were attacked. And the Lyons said in a statement that the 2 officers appeared to have provided inaccurate testimony. Another word for lying, and that the U.S. Attorney's Office was active in investigating the matter. Now, video evidence has revealed that sworn testimony provided by 2 separate officers appears to have been made untruthful statements, he said. Upon conclusion of the investigation, the officers may face termination of employment as well as potential criminal prosecution, he added. After the 14th of January incident, the DHS issued a statement saying the shooting happened after a car crash involving a Venezuelan national who was in the country illegally. After the pursuit, the man got out of his car and an altercation broke out between him and a federal agent. It added, while the subject and law enforcement were in a struggle on the ground, 2 subjects came out of a nearby apartment and also attacked the law enforcement officer with a snow shovel and broom handle, the agency had claimed. As the officer was being ambushed and attacked by the 2 individuals, the original subject got loose and began striking the officer with a shovel or a broomstick. The DHS statement went on to say, fearing for his life and safety as he was being ambushed by 3 individuals, the officer fired defensive shots. The 3 people then ran into an apartment and were later all arrested. Shortly after the incident, Homeland Security Kristi Noem said an agent was beat up and bruised and he was injured. He was getting treatment, and we're thankful that he made it out alive. It was soon followed by a statement on X by U.S. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Minnesota insurrection is a direct result of a failed governor and a terrible mayor encouraging violence against the enforcement. It's all disgusting. The 2 men, Alfredo Alvarado Alzona and Julio Cesar Sosa Cielos, were charged with forcibly assaulting, resisting, or impeding federal officers in performance of their official duties. Now, Sosa Cielos was shot in the leg, and the DHS initially said Alvarado had fled the scene in the car, but officials later revised their version and said it was Alvarado, not Cielos, who did flee. And I hope I'm pronouncing these names correctly. And they also scaled back the earlier claim that 3 people had attacked the immigration agents. Charging documents were indicated there were only 2 individuals actually involved. Now, again, this goes back to the Trump administration, who are very quick to jump on stories. Even the president of the United States himself, when incidents happen, they're right there to say, the people who it's all their fault. The people who protest, our agents are out there fighting for their lives and they have to defend themselves. And then you get these two agents who've lied. I'm sure there's going to be dozens and dozens of more cases where agents are lying out of their teeth to protect their butt because they like to go out there and be aggressive. And why do they like to go out there and be aggressive? Is because they get zero training. And like I've done in my previous podcast, and it has been proven, it is in writing, a lot of these agents don't even have a high school education. Because they want agents so bad, they're recruiting anybody and anything that can walk on two legs, and they give them a federal badge and give them blanket authority, and they go out there and do this crap. This is why Congress, specifically the Democrats too, they want these guys to have body cameras and have them on 24/7 when they're out there doing their job. They want them to show their faces, and they should be identified. All this little secret, Gestapo type mask, we're going to go out there and do what we want, has got to stop. If you're going to go out there and be an ICE agent, you need to be accountable for your actions. You don't know, you need to go out there and be so secretive with your face all wrapped up and no name and stuff. The American people have a right to see who you are, have a name so they can identify you if they're taping you, and the body cameras need to be on you to account for your actions. All right, very, very simple. All right, that's what our own city police officers do. They got a name tag, we know who they are, and they're got body cameras. All right, and if you make a mistake, the video evidence is there. You have no right to go out there and just go do whatever the hell you want when you want and be unaccountable. All right, it's simple. Go out. You can go out and do your job. That's fine. Go out and do your job, but have a complete recorded history of what you're doing when you're doing it. A federal judge also on Thursday blocked the Pentagon's efforts to censure Senator Mark Kelly. Finally, Mark Kelly is getting his time of justice in court. And it's about frickin' time. As you're well aware of, Pete Hegseth, the Department of Defense, is trying to strip away Mark Kelly's pension and also his rank because a video that him and 5 other Democrats made. All right, and I played that video on my previous podcast. I'm not going to do it again because the video itself is becoming old news. But the current and the good news is, as a judge blocked Pete Hegseth, the Defense Department, from trying to take away his rank and some of his pension. And this is just amazing. And also charges have been dropped against the other Democrats as well. So U.S. District Judge Richard Leon, an appointee of former President George Bush, noted the military principle that service members enjoy weakened First Amendment protections to preserve discipline in the armed forces, but that said that no court had ever extended that doctrine to retired service members. He said he would not be the first to do so. This court has all it needs to conclude that defendants have trampled on Senator Kelly's First Amendment freedoms and threatened the constitutional liberties of millions of military retirees, the judge wrote. Leon quoted singer-songwriter Bob Dylan to say, "You don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind is blowing." To say the least, our retired veterans deserve more respect from their government, the judge added, and our Constitution demands they receive it. And so media has requested a comment from the Department of Justice and the Pentagon, and they've got zero answers. Now, Kelly, as you're all aware of, is a retired Navy captain. He sued the department last month after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced the Pentagon had initiated retirement grade determination proceedings and issued a formal letter of censure over the November video. Also, as you're well aware of, I just stated, federal prosecutors sought and failed to secure an indictment against 6 Democrat lawmakers who posted a video that enraged President Trump. And, of course, he sent his cronies immediately after them, reminding members of the military that they were obligated to refuse illegal orders, which is true. And they weren't saying anything that's made up. This is true. And it's, you can refuse illegal orders if you're in the military, if you believe they are illegal and going against the Constitution. The rejection of the case, of course, the 6 lawmakers, who included Senator Mark Kelly and Elise Slotkin of Michigan, was the latest extraordinary brushback by a grand jury of Washington, D.C. residents to a case brought forth by the U.S. attorneys, Jeannie Perino, and top federal prosecutors in the Capitol. And those grand juries even said that, this is ridiculous. It's their First Amendment right to do what they want to do. So this is just all good stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Out of the darkness comes some light. And I'm sure some of the stuff may get appealed. But, these congressional delegation representatives, including Senator Mark Kelly, they're just exercising their First Amendment right, and what they said is true. You can look it up. But Pete Hegseth, who's been on this rampage of turning the Department of Defense into the Department of War, and the macho man rah rah rah, and when a commanding officer gives you an order, you better go out and do it, or you're going to get busted in rank, or we're going to court martial you. I'm in charge here, and you're going to do whatever I say. If I say eat crap, you're going to eat crap. And because that's the military way. And I don't want no LGBTQ, and I don't want men. Women don't even belong in the service, but you're there. That's fine. We'll have to tolerate you. This is all. He's trying to take the military back to the 1950s, and it's. And Mark Kelly, who's an astronaut, as you're well aware of, this man is honorable. He's served our nation well. And these other representatives, there's whether you agree or disagree, they have the right to say it. Okay, they do. Just like on this podcast, as with my commentary, I know there's people out there who hate every word I say, but I have the right and the constitutional right to say it, and using the word commentary as a journalist. So. I'm sorry if that upsets some people, but I'm glad that finally something's going right here for once. And I just think that they're going to get their day in court finally. Moving on to other news, the Environmental Protection Agency repealed the bedrock scientific finding that greenhouse gases threaten human life and well-being. It means that the agency can no longer regulate them, and again, this is just god-awful. This is just ridiculous. So the EPA, which has controlled our greenhouse effect gases and stuff, and has protected our environment for, God, I don't know how long, decades. And, scientific findings going back to 2009 have showed that greenhouse gases and global warming is, in fact, a real thing. But President Donald Trump announced on Thursday that he was easing, or basically not easing, he is erasing the scientific finding that climate change endangers human health and the environment, ending the federal government's legal authority to control pollution that has dangerously heating the planet. And I mean, science is all over there proving that the ice caps are melting from human intervention. I don't know how much proof you out there. The smog, sometimes comes across the Los Angeles basin and stuff. That's all caused by, exhaust emissions from vehicles. That's why we tried to go to electric cars. The polar ice caps is melting at an astonishing rate and shrinking, and therefore increasing the level of waters in our oceans. I mean, you can see that with your own blue eyes. And where does it all come from? And that is caused from encroachment by humans on our planet. But Donald Trump doesn't want that, because he wants to build, and make money. How do we make money? By building. And, that's all. Money is more important than anything else on this planet. As long as we all can fucking get rich, we're doing great. So, and that's basically what this is all about. And he thinks the auto industry is going to love this, that you no longer have any controls, burn up all the carbon monoxide that you can, and folks, go out there and make those cars, and let's make tons of money. everything is just, as long as that's what we can do, he's a happy camper. And the more billions I can make, the happier in. Donald, you can't take it to heaven with you, or hell, wherever you think you're going to go. I know he says he thinks he's still going to go to heaven when he's talking at his prayer breakfast the other week. He thinks he's going to go to heaven. He thinks God loves him. Mm-hmm. All right. So anyway, going back to this greenhouse effect. Yeah. So he made a lot of false statements during his address about it. He said it was a radical rule that became the basis for the greenhouse scam. Everything's a scam to him, and nothing is real. So he said he called renewable sources of energy like wind power a joke and pathetic, falsely claiming that they don't work, they are too expensive and too weak. But solar and wind are now almost always the least expensive and the fastest options for new electricity generation, according to a July report from the United Nations. The United Nations a joke too, just so you know. He thinks that's a joke too. And so the report also said the world has passed a positive tipping point where those energy sources will only continue to become more widespread. Most of Europe agrees with that, except, Donald Trump and the United States of America. Now, when we have other presidents in there, they side with this. But, Donald Trump, he thinks that that's a joke. The three cheapest electricity sources globally last year were onshore wind, solar panels, and new hydropower, according to an energy cost report by the International Renewable Energy Agency. Subsidies, by the way, that was endorsed by Trump and the Republican Party, are artificially keeping fossil fuels viable, said University of Pennsylvania climate scientist Michael Mann. Trump also falsely claimed that European electricity bills are now 2 to 3 times higher than the United States, and our bills are coming way, way down. I challenge any of you out here watching this podcast, has your energy bill dropped? Has it? But in a fact, retail electricity prices in the United States have increased faster than the rate of inflation since 2022, according to the United States Energy Information Administration. The agency expects prices to continue to increase through 2026. Trump also blasted the United Nations climate efforts, saying that he withdrew America from the fake Paris Climate Accord because America was paying so much more than every other country, and others aren't paying anything. Again, the Paris Agreement, decided by international consensus in 2015, is a voluntary but binding document in which each country is asked to set its own national goal to curb planet warming emissions and decide how much money it will contribute to the countries that will be hit hardest by climate change. In other words, I don't care if you're hit by climate change. The United States doesn't want to pay anything because we need all the money for the sales because we're greedy SOBs. And because carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere for more than a century, the United States has put out more of the heat-trapping gases than any other nation, even though China now is the #1 carbon polluter. Now, since 1850, the United States has contributed 24% of the human-caused carbon dioxide that is in the air, according to the Global Carbon Project data. Trump also said, I have a little standing order in the White House, never use the word coal, only use the words clean, beautiful coal. Sounds much better, doesn't it? We all know how many people have done from black lung disease working in the coal mines. How many people? Now, I understand back in the 60s and early 70s, and even some places today, coal is a needed product to create heat. I grew up in Wyoming. I understand how important the coal industry is, but clean, beautiful coal by Donald Trump. Unfortunately, coal is not clean. It's not beautiful. All right, it has killed people from people trying to dig it out of below our surface of our earth. But coal, unfortunately, kills millions of people a year. The president can pretend coal is clean, but real people, mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters will die for this lie, said Stanford University scientist Rob Jackson. Trump also called the carbon footprint a hoax made up by people with evil intentions, a contentions that Texas A&M University climate scientist Andrew Dessler agreed with. Dessler said the term was coined by oil companies and has been designed to shift the responsibility for combating climate change away from corporations to individuals. The science of climate change started 169 years ago with Eunice Foote, who did simple experiments with a flask and sunlight showing that carbon dioxide trapped more heat than the irregular atmosphere. So, I can go on and on here about this. Even the funny story about Trump's also said no more cows. We don't want cows anymore. You're aware of the greenhouse gases with cows' manure. Cows belch methane. A powerful greenhouse gas around the world. Cattle are often raised on lands where forests have cut down, and since forests capture carbon dioxide, cutting away the forest and to raise cattle results in a double whammy. Still, no one is suggesting that cows be gotten rid of, said a person who was talking about this particular subject. The Markets Foundation's organization talked a little bit about the methane gas from cows' manures. And what is true, however, is that cutting methane emissions is a quick win to slow global heating and meet climate targets. Trump also blamed dirty air blowing in from afar, floating garbage in the oceans coming from other countries. It's coming from us, ladies and gentlemen. And so I just have to, go on about this. We have all been educated enough, I hope to God, here in the United States that we know global warming is a real factor here in the U.S. You got to be living under a frickin' rock if you cannot see, the ice caps are melting and what I just talked about here and how important the EPA has been in helping controlling how we take care of Mother Earth and our environment. All right, what Trump is doing here is so freaking childish and so immature and so stupid, and it's all. I never seen a man so obsessed and greedy about money. Sure, we all want to make a buck, but in destroying our earth and the things that we had in place to protect it, because I'm going to tell you folks, once the earth is gone, where are you going to go? Once we destroy our planet and the air that we breathe, what are you going to do? You're not going to be able to make any money because you're not going to have a place to make it. Think about that. The critical thinking skills of some of these people just blows me away about I don't know. It just disturbs me about this. But that's what I do on this show. I like to disturb myself from some of the crap that I see in the news. Moving on, Lasergate. This is another bizarre story of no communication within our current administration. The right hand does not know what the left hand is doing. So the sudden closure of El Paso's airspace this past Wednesday came sometime after the United States Customs and Border Protection officials used an anti-drone laser that was provided by the military, which is right next door to this commercial airport, by the way, to shoot down objects that were later identified as a party balloon. Donald Trump said it was a drone from the drug cartel over in Mexico. 4 people familiar with the matter said that this laser that they was they were authorized to do so, to shoot down this balloon, because they thought it was intrusive and contained drugs or something from the cartel, and that it was an enemy drone. And it was this laser was done without any coordination with officials from the Federal Aviation Administration. Remember, they first wanted to close the El Paso International Airport down for 10 days. And then it was just wound up being shut down for shut down for just a few hours. They were testing the U.S. military-owned laser technology, and it was taking place in proximity to the airport. And again, nobody knew what the hell was going on. And Trump, of course, immediately said it was a drug cartel drone. Now, the airport is a major hub for the region with more than 50 flights scheduled every day. The airspace was reopened several hours later, Wednesday morning. The decision prompted much confusion and finger pointing inside the Trump administration over who was to blame. Even Senator Ted Cruz got in on the action. He was frustrated by the conflicting reports and a lack of information, and he requested a classified briefing with the FAA administration over the closure. At this point, the details of exactly what occurred over El Paso at that time was unclear, and we now know what really happened. This whole story is just a freaking joke. to use less, I don't know what else to say about it. The reason I say it is because of the lack of communication. The crap that went on here, when you've got administration, such as the FAA, the Department of Defense, and even on local level of military, and you're using lasers like this, and you think you've got an enemy drone going over there, and this is also, you heard the word testing, so this was a scientific experiment of a limited use device that they're still testing, and you've got commercial airspace and commercial aircraft that were involved, and you use a word that there's an enemy drone in the area just so they could test this laser. And then of course we all find out at the end it was a party balloon. I mean, come on, folks. Where the heck is your head? We have had so much mass confusion in this administration over incidences, and where nobody is talking to anybody else, and people, they react at the seat of their pants. And this is how you're going to get, one of these days we are going to have a very, very disastrous situation, because communication, especially in this administration, does not exist. And when things happen so quick, as we saw with these hearings with ICE and everything else, you've got Pam Bondi, you've got Tulsi Gabbard, you've got all of these people on the cabinet that are quick to judge and quick to come out with statements that are absolute lies, have never been fact checked, have never been backed up. Even Donald Trump saying this was a cartel balloon. Where the hell did he get that information from? And who told him that it was? And when they do tell him something, he just immediately puts it right out there without doing any fact checking. Fact checking does not exist in this administration. We have seen so much crap that has come out that has scared the bejesus out of people, and because they immediately believe it, because what else are they going to do? And so, and then you've got your own congressional staff, even Ted Cruz, who I won't go into him, but it's just unbelievable. It's freaking, it's scary. What else could I say? All right. And of course, on this podcast, we cannot, wrap things up without talking about the Bad Bunny halftime show. Yeah. So this was a beautiful show. And I'm basically kind of want to summarize just a little bit, just talk about the ratings on this, and so that I want to compare it to the Turning Point USA video that ran during the halftime as a counteraction show for all of those people who do not like Bad Bunny. So anyway, the Nielsen ratings are in, and of course the TPUSA show was not monitored by Nielsen because they streamed it. It wasn't, there were some television networks, very conservative ones, that carry it, but again, Nielsen wasn't involved with that. But Nielsen's a very trusted, decades and decades old measuring service of true statistics about who watched what. So 128.2 million viewers were there for the Bad Bunny halftime show versus about 5 million with peak audience, and that information came from YouTube, as Nielsen, as I just mentioned, does not measure streaming platforms. So the TPS USA show was pre-recorded with a paid studio audience of about 200 people. And they said this was, when they put it on, they said it was live. And this has been confirmed by numerous sources, including production staff that worked on the shoot in an obscure Atlanta production studio. And the audience was prompted when to applause and when not to applause. And all the acts were recorded at different times. Not only that the show was taped several months ago, that also was true, and camera angles and editing was done to make the audience look larger than it actually was. So I have to say here, and also the choice of acts. Kid Rock, who has, he's had music where he talks about, engaging with, with underage girls. And that was in his music, and people then turn around and have the audacity to say, "Look at those gyrating women there on that halftime show. How disgusting! My children are seeing that." But I can go watch Turning Point USA's halftime show and see much better stuff with Kid Rock talking about having with underage girls. That laws are meant to be broken. If you think I'm making this crap up, listen to his music. I'm not making this stuff up. The other complaint was, of course, that Bad Bunny did his music in Spanish. So what? Well, it's an American football game, and we need to hear it in English. By God, God bless Donald Trump and God bless the USA, and we need country and western singers out there singing about him. Well, Bad Bunny was talking about bringing love and the world together in his music, and you didn't have to understand his words to see with your own eyes what the whole show was about. And he sang in his Spanish is because that's what he is, And Lady Gaga and the other talent that was on there, it was a great show. I watched it. I understood everything about it. I can speak a little bit of Spanish, not a lot, but my wife can speak very fluent Spanish because she was stationed in Puerto Rico. We both got it, And he doesn't have to sing in English to understand anything. How about if you don't understand what he's is singing? How about you learn some Spanish then? All right, let's reverse that. And the other people said, well, he's a foreigner. He was born and raised in Puerto Rico, which is a U.S. possession. He's not a foreigner. He's an American citizen. All right, we control Puerto Rico. That island was hit by that violent hurricane some time ago during the first administration. You remember that, where Trump was throwing paper towels at the people for a photo op? Here you go, here's some paper towels, dry yourself out. Who waited also, although money was given to Puerto Rico for infrastructure building. Do you know that the Trump administration has held up that money? There's people on there, well, we've given millions and millions of dollars to fix that. We can't help if they're not spending the money right. Why aren't they spending the money right? It's because Trump has not released that money to Puerto Rico. All right, not yet anyway. Congress, gave it and authorized it, but Trump's holding that money up because he does not like Puerto Rico. He does not like Puerto Rico because they are Hispanic. So, again, it was a great halftime show. And all the arguments about, well, I couldn't understand it, and he's a foreigner. That's not true. Puerto Ricans are American citizens. The only thing that they cannot do is, even though they have a representative of Congress, is yes, they cannot vote. Now, if they came to the mainland, they could vote in elections because they are U.S. citizens. But again, it was a beautiful show. And anybody that's arguing against this, I'm sorry. But, you understood the message about love and bringing people together. And he was talking about how he himself, what he was raised through and how hard he fought to get where he is today. And it was a fantastic show. And, again, people say, well, football is an American game. What football here in the U.S. is our version of football as it is played in Europe. We change some things around, but the game that we play here in the U.S., ladies and gentlemen, originated over there in Europe. And we took a version of it, and we brought it here in the U.S., and it has been the way it is played. And so, please, some people have got to whine and bellyache about everything, and it just does not ever end. And can't we find something more to whine and bellyache about? And speaking of foreigners, if that's the word you want to use. Well, the White House says President Donald Trump has a right to amend a permit to a new bridge between Canada and Michigan, prolonging the latest dispute between the U.S. and our northern neighbors after its prime minister signaled there could be a detente. The Gordie Howe International Bridge, which would connect Ontario, Canada, and Michigan, and would be a vital economic artery between the United States and Canada, is scheduled to open in early 2026. But the Trump administration has now threatened to block the bridge from being open, calling for Canada to agree to a literary unspecified demands as the two nations prepare to renegotiate a sprawling trade pact later this year. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said earlier Tuesday that he spoke with Trump and expressed confidence that the spat could be resolved. But a White House official later Tuesday said the ownership structure of the bridge remains unacceptable for both the United States president and Canada. Now, Canada paid for the bridge, ladies and gentlemen, named after a Canadian-born Detroit Red Wings hockey star. The construction had been underway since 2018. And Trump, again, because he likes to play power play with everything and anything that has to do with Canada, and even though Canada is paying for this bridge, said it would be within his right to amend that permit. Everything is within his right because I have total blanket authority to do what I want because I am the president of the United States. The Supreme Court said I can do whatever the hell I want, when I want, and amend anything I want and do what I want and use my authority to do so. And again, he just loves to destroy our relationship with our friends to the north. He wants Canada to be the 51st state. I want to take it all. And he's angry. He's angry at everybody and anything. And so the fact that Canada will control what crosses the Gordie Howe Bridge and owns the land on both sides is unacceptable, he said. Why is that unacceptable? Caroline Levitt, of course, said, he's a president and he can do what he wants. So it's also unacceptable and more that this bridge is even here. And it's unacceptable that they paid for it and they want to have come across our land. So the new fight is over the bridge is the latest volley in an increasingly sour relationship between the United States and Canada. We've had lovely relationships with Canada until this guy got in office. And he also he talked about inquiring Canada as a 51st state again. God, give it up, would you? God, the sixth grade mentality sometimes is just unbelievable. Now, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer's office has also emphasized that the bridge will be operated under a joint ownership agreement between the state and Canada, Michigan and Canada. But, Trump wants it all controlled by the federal government, even though the Canadian government paid for the entire bridge. See, this is the whole thing. Canada did this as a gracious gesture towards the U.S. They have paid 100% for this bridge, and it's simply connecting Michigan and Ontario, Canada. So people can go back and forth daily. A lot of people work in Canada that live in Michigan and vice versa. A lot of people work in Canada and they live in Canada and they work in Michigan. What the hell is wrong with that? Can you tell me that? What is wrong with that? Absolutely nothing. But again, Trump's got to make a big production out of everything and anything that has to do with the Canadians because he does not like them. And again, hopefully this bridge will open on time and, work out all right. Now, as President Donald Trump changed tariff agreements with a number of countries, there was one constant: goods became more expensive in the United States. This is something else that I need to talk about. All right? Is tariffs. He has said that the tariffs has been so good for the U.S. We made billions of dollars, and it has not affected the U.S. consumers. Guess what? I call BS on that. And there has been some new reports out that is, in fact, yes, affecting U.S. consumers. It has become more expensive for U.S. companies and for consumers to pay for stuff. Now, in a research released Thursday by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, a group of analysts and economists found that in 2025, the average tariff rate on imported goods rose to 13% from just 2.6% at the start of the year. Yeah. The New York Fed found that 90% I'll say that again, 90% of the cost of increased tariffs which Trump imposed on goods from Mexico, China, and Canada and the European Union was paid for by U.S. companies and U.S. consumers. They continue to bear the bulk of the economic burden, yes, of high tariffs imposed in 2025. You saw that on the chart, folks. We are paying for it. And again, if you can't understand that, I'm sure there's some Trump loyalists out there say, well, that's okay. I don't mind paying a little bit extra for getting more money into the United States. But again, all this money is being made. We, the American people, still have not seen any transparency of where it's going, how it's being spent. It's just like all this oil that we're now getting from Venezuela that Trump has created offshore accounts to put that money into, and he will, quote unquote, release it as he sees fit. The entire Trump family is making billions of dollars while he's been in office, and everybody's just turning a blind eye. They don't seem to care, I know some Democrats do, but they're powerless until we get control of the House, and things can be maybe more fact-checked and looked into. So it depends on how you want to vote. And I'm not telling you how to vote, but it depends how you vote, whether you want to see changes or not. If you like how things are going, great. Just vote to your heart. Go for it. So another news, the National Governors Association, and I have been to a couple of these when I was growing up in Wyoming. They used to hold them in Jackson Hole. But the National Governors Association has canceled its annual White House meeting after President Donald Trump is only inviting Republican governors to the gathering. The yearly meeting has traditionally been very bipartisan and offers a chance for state leaders to convene with one another and the president. Because the National Governors Association mission is to represent all 55 governors. And when you wonder I thought we only had 50 states. Well, again, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, our U.S. territories, they have governors. They are invited to this. Is no longer serving as the facilitator for that event and is no longer included in our official program. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt, who is a Republican, wrote a Monday letter announcing plans to forego the meeting, according to the Associated Press. Stitt said the Trump administration's decision to exclude Democratic governors would not divide the association. We cannot allow one divisive action to achieve its goal of dividing us, he wrote. The solution is not to respond in kind, but to rise above and to remain focused on our shared duty to the people we serve. America's governors have always been models of pragmatic leadership, and that example is most important when Washington grows distracted by politics of it. Right. So as you can see here with the Governors Association, some Republicans are supporting it, even though the Democratic governor is not invited. But the problem that we've got here is, again, Trump is trying to create division. He loves to create division. He enjoys it when people spat with each other, and he can flex his power. And in the entire history of the National Governors Association, it has been, bilateral agreement for governors to get together so they can talk about their particular state's need and address it to the president, and how the federal government and state governments can work together. But Donald Trump does not want to work together with Democratic governors because he feels that they're below him. He only wants to work with governors who totally support everything and anything that he is doing. And it's sad that it has come down to this. And so I hope that you can get things fixed here, but it's not going to happen. And I don't know. The news this past week, folks, has just been absolutely depressing. With a couple of good things for the 6 Democrats and Mark Kelly. It's just, and of course and voting against the tariffs for Canada. But everything else has been like, oh my God. And on my last story, we need to talk about the SAVE Act. And I showed you this slide earlier about how the Republicans just passed their version of the SAVE Act, and basically about voter ID. And of course, Trump went on a rant about all of this. And I told you how this kind of tied in with his same rant about naturalized citizens are not really supposed to be here, and most of them may have created fraud, and we need to start deporting naturalized citizens. Well, this also goes on with the SAVE Act. Now, on Friday, Trump indicated he's going to issue an executive order seeking to require voters to present proof of citizenship if the Senate does not pass the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act or Save America Act, which passed in the House with pretty easily. And there will be voter ID for the midterm elections, whether approved by Congress or not. Trump wrote on Truth Social that people of our country are insisting on citizenship and no mail-in ballots with exceptions for a military, disability, illness, or a travel. I'm an American citizen. I'm fine with the way we now vote. Quit lumping us all together. You know, politicians on both sides of the aisle, Republicans or Democrats, like to use the term the American people or the people of our country and blah, 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 blah. And I hate that because why don't they just say for what it truly is? The people of my party, Democrats, or the people of my party, Republicans, quit saying the American people, because that just lumps everybody together, and that's BS, you know, because we all think differently. We have the right to do so. We all have critical thinking skills. People, again, whether you're Republican or Democrat, have the right to think the way they want to think, like I do on this show, and people disagree with me. I respect their right to disagree, just like, you know, you politicians should understand that the American people, you're lumping everybody together. And that's not really true, but I digress. All right, so he also followed up with another post saying he's going to use executive order to make sure people vote the way they need to vote and have their documentation. In other words, he wants federalization now of our national elections. And he goes on and on and on about, you know, I'm going to use that authority, and people, you're going to have to bring 2 forms of ID, your passport and or your birth certificate to vote. I want to make sure you're all American citizens, blah, 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 blah. Now, what is wrong with all of this? And before I tell you what's all wrong with this, is it's not going to probably not going to have enough to pass in the Senate. You need 60 votes to pass in the Senate, and senators already coming out and said this bill is pretty much going to be dead on arrival unless some weird, freaky thing happens. Now, here's what's wrong with the bill. A lot of people do not have their birth certificates. Maybe you do, good for you, but it has already been stated millions, and I'm not saying just 100 or 200, millions of Americans do not have access to their birth certificate. On top of that, thousands do not have a passport. They don't fly, or they don't have any need to go to another country to get a passport. All right? And the third problem is, what about the married women of this country who have maybe Mary Beth Jones on their birth certificate, and now they are Mary Beth Johnson because they got married? What the hell are they supposed to do? Well, you better bring then your marriage license so we can see the change, and then you can vote. You know, for God's sakes, look at the crap that you're putting on people just so they can vote. Our system has worked for years and years and years. I have voted since I was old enough to vote at 18. Never had an issue. And they don't like to bring the idea of people bringing their driver's licenses. Well, just because you have a driver's license prove who you are, and even if you got the little star on it, which requires, more proof that you're an American citizen, that's not good enough. This is another example of the Republicans trying to control the federal elections so they can stay in power until hell freezes over. That's really what Donald Trump wants. He wants to have his party and his way of thinking in office until the earth blows up from not having any more environmental protection because the greenhouse effect is fake. So this is what it's all about, though, and again, the people in the Senate, I think, have enough common sense to understand this bill in its present form is stupid. It really, really is, and it's just going to create more heartache for the states to hold elections with this kind of stuff. The system we got in place right now is fine. Okay, I don't know. Again, I don't know what the people are trying to think out there, but again. It goes on and on, doesn't it? Anyway, that's my show for this week. I had a lot of information. I know I went through a lot, but replay the video if you want to pick up back on it. But there's just so much stuff that happened this past week. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this show. My name is Roy Garden. I am the host of the Right Has Left podcast. Until next week, you really try to have a good week. Take care.